All right, I'm going to start with you, Emmanuel. Give me some good advice on measuring security effectiveness.
Well, taking all the data from your security tools and understanding whether they're configured correctly against the threats you care about would be a good way of starting.
I like that. Now, Bethany, do the complete opposite for me. Please give me some bad advice on measuring your security effectiveness.
Well, what I think is really important is to remember it's not just about measuring, it's about communicating security effectiveness. So, what I like to advise people is to remember this is a self preservation game. So, only report the positive statistics, use lots of jargon. And in that way, you'll really connect with your audience, and better, they'll think you're so smart that they won't even they'll be so intimidated, not ask any questions.
I like that. All right, Emmanuel, it's in your court. Give me some worse advice on measuring security effectiveness.
So we have 1 million critical vulnerabilities and we must patch them all. And this is why we're not protected against any threat of interest.
All right. Well, Bethany takes the glass half full. You take the glass half empty. They're both horrible. Let's start a show.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Super Cyber Friday. My name is David Spark. I'm your host for the show. Today's topic is hacking security effectiveness. The good and the bad ideas we want from you is about measuring security effectiveness. We're going to be spending an hour of critical thinking about how to holistically make sure your tools are working for you. My guests today, you just saw them, but let me make a more formal introduction. We have Bethany DeLude, who is the CISO Emeritus. She used to work for the Carlyle Group, but no more. No more. And also we have Emmanuel Salmona, who's the CEO and co-founder for Nagomi Security. And you know what? We're so thrilled that Nagomi Security is our sponsor for today's episode. Thank you, Nagomi, for sponsoring today's episode. All right. Lots of ways to participate. Those of you who've been here many times before, you know all these different ways. But let me just point out the bad idea and the 10% tip is what's the worst way to measure security effectiveness and we want how to measure security effectiveness, 10% better tip. And, remember, you can come on at any time, join us, with a Bring Me On for if you'd like to ask a question, make a comment on area and on camera. Also, we have the little question mark bubble in the upper right-hand corner. Please ask us questions. You can also vote for your favorite question as well. All right. Classic setup we have for the show. Actually, I have a new game. We'll have that ready for the next show, too. We'll play a new game, I think, on the next show. But we'll play the public interest. We'll play the Department of Yes. Questions, answers, and we'll have a meetup at the end of the show. I do want to remind people that next week, because of the holiday weekend, no show. But we'll have a show the week after. So 2 weeks from now will be the next show. Our topic is hacking metrics that matter. My feeling is if you're interested in this topic, you'll be interested in that topic. Go ahead, click the link on the bottom of the screen. That will take you to another window. You'll still very much be in this chat. You will not be taken out of this chat. And you can register for that event as well. All right, let's get the show started. Why don't we? All right, I'm going to start off with this story. I remember Adam Glick was the CISO I was talking to. Oh, I think he works for a financial firm now. And we were walking the floor of RSA, and there were two things that he asked. He goes, I want to know, and this goes back maybe 5 years ago. He goes, I want to know if the tool I bought is actually doing the thing I wanted to. And here's the other thing, and I thought this was a good question. I set my tool up this way today. I want to know 6 months, a year from now, how friggin' out of whack is it now? Because and this goes to a question I also asked before. Nothing in security is set it and forget it. So Emmanuel, address these two concerns. Why has this so historically been a major problem? The two things of how do I know my tool's doing the thing and how out of whack am I now 6 months, a year from when I originally set it up?
Well, I think Adams asked that really well. I think that what we see today is that we have so many security tools. We have much more than we had 10 years ago. The tools themselves changed so much. Everyone is, creating a platform. And it's really hard for organizations to even know if they have the right capabilities in place. Is everything, if they're even using the right licenses, modules, it becomes really complicated. Now, why does it become out of whack? That's also a great question. You can think about the attack surface, those assets we're trying to defend. it's changing so much and so fast, and it's so hard for security teams to get a handle of this. So it makes it very hard for them to actually know that their security tools are actually deployed, configured well on what they're trying to defend against.
All right. Very good point. What about you, Bethany? I'm sure like these same stories that Adam asked me. I as a CISO, I'm assuming historically you've run into this. Yes.
Absolutely. And I think it's, when it comes to your tooling, just like human behavior, you trust but verify. So you have to have some type of a feedback loop with the tooling that you've deployed to make sure that it is in fact still delivering the value that it delivered when you first deployed it. And I'll give an example. As a CISO, I used to creep on all of the SOC tickets, and I would start to see patterns. Maybe there was an uptick in phishing that was reported. And I thought, wait a minute, we invested in very expensive tooling to not have that be the case. Why are we seeing an increase? And as you start unpacking that, you might find that the roadmap for that particular tool set grew stale. You might find that the threat landscape changed, and that tool just wasn't designed to identify that particular threat. So you need to layer in something differently. So I think that the important thing is to make sure you have some type of monitor of your monitoring.
Yeah. So this brings up a good point, and I can't remember which. I think we're doing a segment on in a future episode. But there are tools that 2 years ago worked great for the threats 2 years ago. Not working so great for the threats of today. And two things you have. A, can it be retooled to deal with it? Or B, how do we get it out of our environment? Because it's not working. I mean, this I'm assuming happens all the time too. But let me ask you, going back to you, Bethany, did you struggle to get things that weren't working out of your environment?
Well, that's I would say the challenge is depending upon what the tool set is. It's kind of say it depends. I know that's a weak answer, but it depends. Certain
because
tools are
there's never a
stickier
black and
than
white.
others.
It's
Yeah,
because it doesn't all of a sudden stop working. It's a gradual slope, right?
exactly. And sometimes, we'll take the approach of fix a pain point with a point solution, like something to layer in, and then work on the longer term strategy to pull out the more complicated component that just is underperforming. Other times, it'll be a more straightforward rip and replace. You were using a certain kind of tool set, found better tooling that is using more modern technologies. I know we can't have a CISO series program without saying AI. So something where they've really invested in making sure that the tool set is keeping up with the modern threats. And in those cases, we've had an easy situation of rip and replace.
Emmanuel, let me come back to you. And you kind of referenced this earlier. This is a common problem that we see just in general with vendors trying to sell into environments is they're not aware, or they choose not to be aware, that they're actually going into an existing environment with which there's a ton of tools working. And your reference is the tool may be working as a silo, but it's not working in the environment. How do you measure that? Because that seems now we're complicating things greatly because each tool has its, red, yellow, green light to tell you we're working, but together, who knows?
No, exactly. I think that if you think about it, most of the tools are protecting one part of the organization. They're very vertical in nature. We have that tool for email and the other for endpoint and the other for identity, and we go forth. But when we think about it, what was the reason in the first place we actually had the tool? We had a risk in mind, or there was a threat scenario that we cared about. For example, we're trying to defend against ransomware, but ransomware is horizontal in nature. It starts in one place, it goes to another, and ultimately it gets to its destination. And the problem is that for a lot of organizations, it's very hard to know how does that tool set actually fit in the overall schemas of things in terms of their architecture. And it's actually very hard for them to know because they need to understand all the tools and actually understand how their actual environment is protected, which is just tough.
Well, okay, we've talked about a lot of problems here. I want to shift conversation into solutions, all right? Enough with the problems. We're 10 minutes into this. Let's talk solutions. So how have you, I'll start with you, Bethany, been tackling this problem?
Yes. So something that I do is I have great networks with peer CISOs,
Hmm.
and chances are we are trying to solve the same problem. And something that we often do is we'll have a favorite new toy discussion, and
Okay.
it's basically talking about something that you added to your environment that you were delighted, like pleasantly surprised. And when I have those conversations, I look and challenge my team, like we're not in love with the tool that we have to solve a particular problem. Someone I know has a favorite new toy designed exactly for that problem. This is now something I'd like you to research and see if it does in fact make sense for us.
That I just had a meeting with some other people, other media people like myself, and we had, what's your favorite tool that you added to your environment? That's actually a really, really good tip. Emmanuel, I mean, this is kind of your bailiwick with Nagomi, but let me ask, what was the opportunity you saw that you go, there's a solution here?
The opportunity is that our cybersecurity industry, ultimately, we increase the spend. You can see the spend year over year just going up, and the number of breaches just going up and up and up. Number of
Yeah.
tools goes up. We're not getting the productivity or the effectiveness we're expecting to get. So that's the big opportunity. Can we actually continue as an industry, just continue spending? A wise CISO told me about a year ago, he said, this is probably one of the only cases where if you buy and deploy yet another tool, your security might actually go down because the complexity rises.
Right.
And then ultimately your team is overloaded and they're just not able to get things done.
Yeah, it's
So
not a
this is
one
where
plus one equals three situation. It's a 1 + 1 might equal 1.
Exactly. And I think that the opportunity is we're hearing right now from so many customers around the world that they're trying to consolidate, to rationalize their stack of controls. They understand they have too much. And the question is, how do you do it without increasing your risk? The worst thing would be I removed the tool, and now I got breached. Why did you do it in the first place? So they're trying to do it in a very savvy way, in a very informed way, and that's what they're trying to solve for.
All right. Oh, we have a question to come in. Let me take a look over here. Let's. Ah, so this reference to what I was talking about before from James Sparenberg. How often do you make yourself vulnerable to an old threat by removing a tool? And maybe it doesn't happen at all. Do you like, and it's also possible an old threat is no longer a problem because there's a different tool that deals with that. What do you think, Bethany?
I think I'm going to kind of answer a slightly nuanced
Go
question,
ahead.
which is instead of talking about like the old vulnerability, but look at the old tech and do you really need the flashy new thing? If you have some, I'll give an example: application whitelisting. If you have deployed that throughout your environment, and which has a lot of administrative overhead, right? Because you have to fingerprint every executable, things like that. But if you've done it well and comprehensively, you've just avoided a rash of terrible things that can happen that a lot of modern technologies have been developed because doing that well is so hard. So part of this, I always go back to, gosh, I'm dating myself because this is over 20 years ago, my very first SANS class. And I remember it was Steve Northcutt said at the time he was their CTO that all software is poison. And what he meant by that is that whenever you add anything into your environment, to Emmanuel's point, it adds complexity. So before you add something new, make sure that something that you already have is being optimally leveraged. So sometimes I think that's a key to kind of smartly modernizing your stack by really critically assessing, what do I have? Is there something additional it can be doing that I don't continue to just increase my complexity? And the one piece we didn't talk about, which was sometimes it's easier to get investment for a tool, and then what happens is the human resources that you need to actually get the benefit from the tool, that's not properly factored in. So I think before you add anything into your environment, you have to do that critical resource assessment as well.
Very good point. All right, actually, let's. We're going to actually go to our very first game. Hold tight.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
We're playing the public interest. The audience plays along here too, as well. We have only 4 questions. Very difficult to get all 4 correct. I will tell you. I think it's a record. It's just, or our standing is 2, maybe 3 guests have actually done it. That's how tough this is, but it's a simple game. You'll see in just a second. Here's the very first question. Most average monthly search queries, what is more, adapt or predict? Bethany, what do you think? By the way, I have not seen the answers to this. Our producer Rich created this, so I'm going to play along as well. What are you thinking?
This is like a true or false. I hate that. I wish we had like 4 or 5 choices.
And by the way, keep in mind, these aren't just security professionals. It's anyone on Google searching. And it's just the word adapt or the word predict, not adapt blank or predict blank. It's just that one word. Why people are typing those one words in, I don't know, but it does happen.
I'm going to go with A, adapt.
Adapt? I'm going to go B, predict. What do you think, Emmanuel?
I'm going to go predict. I think as people, we're much more focused on the future and understanding what's going to happen rather than actually changing ourselves and adapting to things. So I'm going to go with B.
All right, well, let's see what the general audience response is. Well, we're pretty mixed. It looks like a 50-50 split from the audience, too, on this one. Let's see. Correct answer is? It is adapt. Bethany is on the board with 1. You and I, Emmanuel, we're not. But they almost a 2-to-1 difference there. Okay. All right. Scalability, standardization, streamlining. I'm going to go with D, standardization. That's where I'm going. What do you think, Emmanuel?
Yeah, I would agree. D, standardization, I think makes much more sense.
What do you think, Bethany?
I'm going to be a spoiler and go scalability.
Well, don't be a spoiler. The correct answer is if you get it right. So we have C, D's, and E's. A lot of people saying streamline. All right, it's all over the board here. It does not, by the way, Shomo, I'm sorry, says, does that include standard and streamline? No, it is only that word, nothing else. That is it, just that word. Here we go. Ooh, tie on scalability and standardization. All right, look at that. So you said scalability, right, Bethany?
That's right.
All right, you've got 2. Emmanuel and I are on the board with 1 each. All right. All right, method, optimization, and standard. I'm thinking it's F or H. I'm gonna go H. What do you think, Bethany?
Method, F.
F, all right.
So I would love to say optimization because I believe in it, but I think it's going to be an H.
H, okay. Emmanuel and I are H with standard. Bethany is F. And by the way, just so you know, all the letters, the reason they're changed is because there's a lag between us and the audience of a few seconds. And sometimes they're answering the previous, and we have no idea which one they're answering. So we make all the letters different here. All right, here we go. Correct answer is? It is standard. All right, now, that means we're all tied right now. We are 2 all around. Nobody's going to get a perfect score here. This is the last question. This may determine the winner here. Ooh, 4 of them. Circle back, drill down, game changer, low-hanging fruit. Oh, my God. I'm going to go drill down. That's what I'm saying, drill down. What do you think, Bethany, Emmanuel?
Game changer.
That was number 2 for me.
Yeah, I think game changer as well.
All right. So we could have 2 winners or 1 winner here or a 3-way tie. Let's see. What is the correct answer? 3-way tie. That I don't know if we've had before. Circle back. I would not have guessed that. Oh, my God. Well, definitely people don't really care about drill down or low-hanging fruit at all. But good job, everybody. I don't know if we've had a 3-way tie before. 1 for 4 for Dwayne. The most satisfying ending. By the way, kudos to Rich. Rich actually comes up with some very creative questions on this. So thank you again, Rich, for creating this for us. Anyone, so nobody got 4 for 4. I can't imagine that. But anyone get 3 for 4? I'd be interested to know. All right, let's get. This is perfect timing because we were talking about specific solutions for this, and this is really your bailiwick, Emmanuel, because this is what you're doing over at Nagomi Security. So I do want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what you're doing, how you are actually measuring security effectiveness with Nagomi, and and essentially pointing people in the right direction. Go ahead, explain.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know Nagomi Security, our objective is to maximize the utilization of your existing security tools against the threats that actually matter, the threats that are actually targeting your organization. And what we see from customers is that we're solving the problem for them of understanding where the tools are actually running effectively across. Are they even covering the attack surface? You might have the best tool, but it's just not deployed. It might be misconfigured, or even worse, you're not even using the right capabilities the tool can provide to you. The second part is we're helping organizations operationalize MITRE ATT&CK. A lot of organizations have embarked in this journey. They want to use MITRE ATT&CK in a better way. And we're helping them do that and actually answer a question of, am I protected against that particular adversary that we just heard about, Black Basta or Spider or Scattered Spider or whatever that may be? You've probably had that case of you hear about another organization getting breached. You don't know if you're exposed. Is it relevant? Do you need to do something? And we're able to help organization do that. And the last, which is probably the most interesting one, is we help you measure the effectiveness of your security program. Basically letting CISOs and security teams know, are we doing a good job? Are we moving the needle? And telling a story to other stakeholders that are just not cybersecurity people. It might be the board or the executives, might be others, and evangelizing that across the board.
All right, can I ask you a question? I'm going to challenge you on that, because this is something I hear from CISOs all the time. And it's going to be the classic of, well, how and why do I trust whatever the heck you're doing to tell me that I am using effective? Like, what is the empirical evidence that this is effective or not effective? Emmanuel?
Well, yeah, I think the hard answer, or the hard thing that we try to do at Nagomi, or that we're doing here, is we're actually going in and we're checking each and every one of the configurations and the policies of the tools. We're checking whether they're covering the attack surface in a very holistic way. And we're doing so without being a black box. So it's not like, outside-in scanning or a questionnaire, but it's something that is very objective. And we're allowing the users also to check whether we've done it in the right way. So ultimately, it's about understanding each and every one of those tools, the way they're deployed, and what the meaning of the deployment against the risk they're trying to defend against.
And I'm just intrigued. Is there a way, so I know that this tool is doing its job, it's covering X%, or it's covering this area, and this one's covering this thing, and I can see that, yeah, this one's working, but it's only doing a 1% job. Can you see this kind of stuff in your environment?
Yeah, definitely. We can see it, and we can even see whether you're not using licenses that you have, or modules, or particular capabilities. But I think the worst,
which I'm sure everyone does.
Everyone. But the worst situation is people just have the tools, they're paying for them. You might have 20,000 licenses bought for your endpoint tool, but it's deployed on 18,000, and you don't even know that you're missing coverage. And this is usually where the bad things start. So you're both paying for something you're not getting, and you might get breached, which is the worst thing.
That really does sound like a bad situation. All right, here's the thing I'm going to do. I'm putting up a poll. This sounds really, really interesting. I just put up the poll right now. It's now visible. Just ask, would you like a warm handoff to learn more from Nagomi Security? Go ahead, answer the poll. We will make sure that happens next week for you. So please go ahead and mark that as well. It sounds pretty darn interesting. My feeling is, and we had another vendor like this as well, is you can pretty much prove your ROI kind of right away, can't you? Yes, Emmanuel?
Yes, I think some of our customers told us we didn't have a budget for this, but this is just going to pay for itself in no time, because usually what we find is there's gaps, redundancies, overlaps, and it's true. I mean, we're saving time for people for reporting. We're reducing overlapping tools. So yeah, it makes it an easy sell internally in the organization.
Yeah. I mean, because that becomes just the major problem with security in general, is finding ROI. It's like, well, I don't know. But now this is like kind of the ROI of trying to find ROI, if you will. All right, let me get to this question that Aman Sood asked, and I will throw this to you, Bethany. What is the most effective way to gracefully translate a vulnerability into a business risk? Is it threat modeling, business impact analysis, or something else? I'm sure as a CISO, this happens all the time. What do you do? And is it a it depends situation?
Well, I think the key to communicating security effectiveness is being keenly aware of your audience. Like who is the stakeholder with whom you're having that conversation, and then that would tell me how to talk about a vulnerability. Whether if I'm like, let's say we're trending up in our in a bad way, as in our patch velocity keeps getting worse. So we are seeing more unpatched vulnerabilities, something like that. Then I might tell a story about something in the news where there was a major hack that was as a result of a vulnerability being exploited. I may even share, where we stand relative to that specific vulnerability and what tooling is needed to make sure that we don't find ourselves in the same position as that company, and always picking one that resonates. So I think the key is which method of communication will work best for that audience in talking about vulnerabilities. When I talk to someone in infrastructure, I might say, "Hey, what's up with your patch program? It stinks." We are, the number of unpatched criticals is rising. What's going on there? And have them have to perhaps report metrics, on that. When I need an investment in a tool for myself, I might tell the story differently. Again, using the here's what happened to someone who looks like us. Let's not be them.
All right. I can assume also your tool, because we're talking, Bethany, you were just talking about, communicating, the right thing to the right audience type of thing.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, another side benefit of your product sounds like, and I would love to hear some kind of anecdotal story if you could, is you got the assets for storytelling here, don't you? Yes?
Yeah,
Explain.
I think what people want to know is for the example we had before, is that vulnerability relevant for us? Is it happening in the wild? Is it currently exposed? And do we have compensating controls or any mitigations in place to reduce the risk in a reasonable fashion? And I think that each layer in the organization is actually thinking about it in a different way. The board just wants to know, what's the risk? Are we exposed, and what are we doing about it? Management usually wants to know, okay, well, what's the initiatives? How can we actually drive forward our ransomware readiness in a very clear and concise way? And usually when we go to the operational levels, they want to know, okay, well, what are we doing in that particular tooling or that process in order to reduce the exposure against that particular threat or vulnerability? And it's ultimately the problem we had in the industry is that we didn't have one set of data to actually connect the layers. We were all talking in very disparate ways, and now we have a way of actually talking in the same way.
Ah, excellent. All right. Let me remind everybody that we have a button at the bottom of the screen to register for, in 2 weeks, our Super Cyber Friday event. So please click on that and register in 2 weeks. In addition, please go to our polls. And please, if you'd like a nice warm handoff to the people over at Nagomi, we'll make that happen for you. All right. We got some more questions come in. Okay. Let me go to my list here. Well, okay, so let me ask you this. We often ask the question of what's the one metric that matters, and the one we often hear is mean time to respond. We hear that one. That's a really, really popular, because honestly, that's kind of a holistic question, isn't it? Because mean time to respond is not tied to any one thing. It's like how physically your whole team responds, how fast you can get that information back. Two questions to you, Bethany. One is that the best metric you think? And two, or respond, remediate. You can use those two words interchangeably if you'd like. But is that the best measurement? And then second, how do you struggle to measure that?
So I think the challenge with MTTR is that it's not necessarily intuitive. When you're, depending upon, again, who your audience is which metric. So within our security operations, That's a really important metric. You want to know, especially if you have an outsourced provider, are they meeting their SLAs relative to MTTR? When you bring that to an executive team, that may not resonate as much as picking something really simple to show that you're a responsible steward of resources. Like, is everything that you bought me, like all the security agents, we'll just pick those as an example, are they all installed on the correct version and operating effectively? That's something people understand. We bought you this. Is it working? And are you making sure it's working? Everyone's interested. If you go to the board, if you talk to your steering committee, they want to know about incidents. So what has happened? How did you handle it? And what was the impact? So having some type of metric around that, at the end of the day, we want to reduce the impact and likelihood of a cyber event. So you always want to be talking about, and here's how well we've done relative to that objective.
And I think, David, one thing this reminds me is a story I had with a CISO about a couple of months ago, and I asked him, how do you measure the effectiveness? And he started laughing, but then he said, well, I go to the board once a quarter and I tell them we didn't get breached this quarter. That's as good as looking into only MTTR, which is obviously relevant, but it's just very reactive, and it doesn't tell the story of everything the team is doing to prevent, reduce risk, and be proactive ultimately, which is what obviously stakeholders are trying to get.
Yeah, and I was going to say on that, when you're talking about with the board is, I think you wear different hats, based on who you're having the conversation with. Like when I walk into a board meeting or an audit committee meeting or a risk committee meeting, I'm wearing my risk executive hat. So I'm going to talk about the risk that they're concerned about, that which is typically things like reputational risk, financial risk, operational risk, regulatory risk, and then talk about what we're doing within the cyber program that helps manage risk in the areas that they already care about. When I go into a meeting with, say, the cross-functional security steering committee type of a meeting, well, then I'm in there as a strategic business partner. So I want to talk about how the security program is enabling the business and preserving the value of our investments, because we all know you can't have business as usual if there's an incident. And what we've done in those areas, and you're looking for their advice on how to prioritize future investments, and especially anything that requires cross-functional coordination or will impact a user, because you need our support on those.
One of the things I've talked about this with Mike Johnson, one of my co-hosts. I said, how do you determine a security program's effectiveness, or and then the second thing is, connected to that is, how do you measure the success of a CISO, for that matter? And one of the things that he said, which doesn't clearly come to it, but it does address. He goes, well, it's more of a situation of, how am I on building out the program? How is the program getting built out? Because how well I'm doing today compared to somebody else is two different things. It's depending on the industry, how new we are, how green we are, how big we are, how big of a target we are, how sensitive the data is, so many different things, and how mature we are in the program. So let me ask you, Emmanuel, first. How does your product tie into how a CISO is building out their program? Because it sounds like this kind of marriages pretty well, yes?
Yes. I think we want to answer the question of, are we doing things right, the right way? And are we doing the right things? So on one side, we want to make sure that we're actually reducing the risk in the most effective manner, so that we've reduced all of the risk we can, all of the material risk to the organization. To do that, we need to understand, what are we trying to defend against, threats, scenarios, whatever that may be, and check what is it that we can do given the tools, the people that we have. On the flip side, we also want to make sure that we're maximizing the effectiveness in a financial manner, meaning we've maximized the investments. We don't want to be doing that and spending too much money, having overlaps, etc. So from an investment standpoint, we want to make sure that we've maximized the investments and the utilization of those tools. We don't have redundancies and overlaps. So that's kind of the two things we're looking at, and we're able to answer those two questions with one same tool.
All right. Let me go to this question from Shomo here. I'm putting this up. I didn't know the term of OKR, but it's sort of a measurement tactic. Do we like OKRs? Could you talk a little bit about your experience or guidance on really good security objective monitoring processes with an organization leader, audience, and stakeholders. So this really is calling out OKRs in general. Bethany, what's your take on this Shomo's question?
Yeah, so objective key results, and we definitely like them. Just as an accountability measure, you come up with your objective and the key results that support it, and then you measure how well you're doing, against those throughout the year. You can do the same thing if you're doing performance reviews. You can have the OKRs for your program and assign them to different domains, and folks know, okay, here's how you're supporting the overall wellness of the security program. So I like OKRs. I like metrics. I like data. They're a good thing, as Martha Stewart would say.
Let me ask, with your product, Emmanuel, where is it that your customers find the greatest value the quickest?
So I think the first thing is they find if there's utilization gaps. They have tools, they're misconfigured, there's lacking coverage, they're just not running effectively. That's the easy one. And basically, they're maximizing the utilization of those tools. The second part, which is there's so much burden today on security teams on reporting. The CISO needs to get a report weekly or monthly about what's going on. The board needs to get a report. The risk team needs to get a report. And everyone is asking different questions on different, even using different frameworks. And it's all ultimately coming down to the ability to extract the telemetry from those existing tools, normalizing it, and being able to answer it in a way that is meaningful for the audience. So the second part is, can we actually automate all of that? I know that a lot of organizations have tried to build their own Power BI, mega dashboards, which is ultimately very hard, as we know, and it's hard to maintain. And that's kind of some area where we see just a lot of manual burden on teams being completely removed.
Very, very good point. Were you about to say, Bethany?
No, I was just kind of thinking back on the OKR question, and just how I've built them into the program. So it's just kind of ruminating on that still. I like that question.
Then we've got a call that just came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right, here we go. We're going to play the Department of Yes here, and I'm going to start with you, Emmanuel. And this comes from James Sparenberg, and I'm just going to say this actually happens. I'll just leave it at that. This does happen. So for some, it's a damn good idea, I guess. But I would take this back. The first part of this doesn't happen, but the last part definitely happens. From James. Make sure you don't buy any tools until after you've been hit by a type X, Y, or Z attack. That way you will never buy a useless tool. Now, I will just say this. No one would need your product if they did it this way, right, Emmanuel? Why do you think this is a good idea?
Well, it's an amazing idea. You're never wrong because you're always coming in and saying, I told you so. We should have bought the tool. We didn't buy it. We got breached.
But you never do an I told you so because you never tell them to buy anything at the beginning.
Yeah,
go on ahead.
Yeah, so actually we do hear about it. So, being reactive ultimately is something that we hear a lot about organizations doing. So I think that, I think it's a great idea. We can try it out and see what comes out.
All right, I'm going to give you two of these. I'm going to give you a, sir, yes, sir! But I'm also going to give you, oh no! Because you didn't flesh that one out fully for me. Bethany, I'm throwing this to you.
Yeah, so we always want to know what is relevant to our business, our sector. And so this is a way of doing really focused market research. It has affected us. Now we know that we are vulnerable to this particular attack, and there's tooling that can help us so that there won't be recidivism. And now we're going to go buy that.
All right. Before that, I'm sorry. I'm going to give you that. I like it, Bethany. We have just, though, received a classic, what we call a classic Dutch, which Dutch Schwartz used to be our champion of bad ideas. And he comes up with some very creative bad ideas. And here we go. this is a little cut off, but I'm posting it here. Borrow Punxsutawney Phil and place him in a brown box labeled risk. Bring him to your quarterly meeting. If he comes out of the box, your risk has gone up. If he naps contently, it's gone down. Now, Emmanuel, you're Israeli, correct?
Yes.
Do you know who Punxsutawney Phil is?
No.
Okay, so this you're at a disadvantage here. So Punxsutawney Phil, we have something out here in the U.S. called Groundhog Day, and there's some stupid tradition that if the groundhog comes out on, we just had Groundhog Day, comes out, we have X more months of winter or weeks of winter. I forget what the amount is. Does anyone know what the actual amount is? And if not, then spring is going to come sooner. 4. Is that 4 weeks or 4 months? It can't be 4 months. It's 4 weeks, I guess. So that's who Punxsutawney Phil is. It's as idiotic as it sounds, because why would a groundhog and their shadow have anything to do with winter? But it's a dumbass tradition that continues on. So, but this is Dutch coming up with these brilliant ideas. Why would a groundhog and their shadow, or coming out of the box or not coming out of the box, have anything to do with your risk? Bethany, I'll have you start with this.
I kind of love it because I think having a prop is really good. So I think
I do like you're like the Carrot Top of risk. Go ahead.
Exactly. It's like I keep my no button close at hand. You just never know. And a little school bell for the good idea. So I think this is a great idea, and it kind of makes it objective. It's not Bethany's perspective on risk.
Right.
This is the all-knowing Punxsutawney.
It's a third party. It is
exactly.
How different is this third party from any other third party? I'm with you.
Exactly.
All right, Emmanuel, I know you're at a disadvantage because you don't know Punxsutawney Phil, but I know you're going to read up on him after this.
Definitely.
Why do you think this is a good idea?
So I think because we want to go to the board and we want to play it down and make it as simple as possible for cybersecurity, they just want to know thumbs up, thumbs down. Are we doing well? Are we not? And that's
They don't want the nuance. I like that.
Exactly.
Just give it to me straight. All right. That you saved yourself right there. Good job. I'm very impressed. Very good. All right. Thank you. Get some more questions in, everybody. Click the link at the bottom of the screen. And also, don't forget the poll. We have the poll to say you would like a warm handoff to our fine people over at Nagomi Security. And at the very end of the show, that link at the bottom is going to change to our meetup portion, which we will have over on Discord. So if you don't currently have a Discord account, get one very quickly. All right. I'm going to ask this of your product, Nagomi, because this was something, I made a video of this years ago, and this is a question that's often answered. To what level does your product answer this question, are we secure?
Well, it's actually built to answer the question of are we secure? But what we try to do is we try to break down the question of are we secure against what? And we're trying to do it based on, well, it actually depends because I don't have unlimited resources. I don't have all the tools in the world. I can only do the best work that I have. So I think that what we have a notion of, have I eliminated all of the preventable breaches? Preventable breach basically means I could have prevented that breach given all the tools that I have in place. If I can do it, we've actually maximized everything we can do. And if something crazy happens, it's up to coincidence. So we basically are helping organizations to do exactly that, to check whether, given the tools, given everything they have they maximized it based on their threat profile and based on what we hear about in the news. Like Bethany said, what's the story going out there right now? This way we're relevant and it's right now happening, and it's not like ransomware of 3 years ago. And by doing so, we're able to reduce the threat exposure against those to the maximal extent that I can.
All right, very, very good. Bethany, I know you've done this plenty of times in your past, and you've probably expressed frustration, but has anything good, I want you to speak for the positive of point-in-time security effectiveness assessments and surveys?
Sure. Well, they give you a baseline. Like it's always important to have a place to start. Like if you're a new CISO and you have you've selected a framework, or the company that you arrived at puts a lot of credibility, say, into the cybersecurity framework. If I was a new CISO, I'd want a point in time assessment to say, here's where we were, or are when I started. And then select a cadence, generally we'll say every 3 years, and say, okay, after I got that point in time, that helped inform my roadmap, and then here's how our maturity has changed under my leadership. So I think those kind of point in time assessments are necessary. And it also gives that independent validation. So a point in time assessment is a pen test. You can do continuous pen test, with certain types of third parties where they're constantly, attacking you. But if you were to do when you have like a compromise assessment, or purple team or something, that's point in time, but it provides incredible information with which to strengthen your program.
By the way, I'm looking for, I knew we got a good advice early on, maybe even from Dutch, who's the king of the bad advice. But please tell us, like to know your tips. And actually, this was something you and I talked about, Emmanuel, in our promotional video, was we'd like to know how the heck you're all doing this right now. Like, where have you had success in measuring and like, oh, I did this before, this really works, we're going to keep doing it again and again and again. So please ping us back, and please get your questions in. We want your questions as much as possible. All right, back to my own questions. How can you show this? Let's talk about resilience. How have you, Bethany, shown that you are more resilient? And I gotta assume, do you guys take, or did you historically take, like, what's in the news and say, are we protected from that? Something our competitor just got hit with? I mean, did you play that game? We hear CISOs do this a lot. Like, after something big happens, like, if this happened to us, what would happen to us? What would we do?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great game to play. And it's also something that you want to be thinking bigger than just us in those situations. Like, we'll take like MOVEit, for example. Like, maybe that's not a system that you use, but maybe your strategic partners use that system. So making sure that you're reaching out beyond your borders, so that when, because if you go into a board meeting, steering committee, people have heard, hey, we saw this in the news, how did that affect us? And you can say, well, it didn't affect us directly, but indirectly, we were concerned that it could have affected us. So we proactively reached out to this set of third parties to understand and get positive affirmation one way or the other on how we were affected. So that's one thing that I always think is helpful to show your relevance there.
Mm-hmm. Here, let me go to you, Emmanuel. So just focusing on the resilience issue, because we're hearing more and more security programs are literally just saying we're a resilient program. We're not but that's very much what their security program has become. Your tool, Nagomi Security, is showing how effective your environment is. Can it also show resilience of capabilities?
So yes, I think that as an industry, we're moving away from just compliance. Do I have a tool? Do I have that capability?
And also blocking. I mean, blocking, yes, but moving away from just being blocking.
Exactly. So moving away from the reactive side into proactive. Mm-hmm. So what we're saying here is we don't want to just say, do I have a tool in place? We want to say, is it actually effective? And is it giving me the resilience I'm expecting to get? Now, on one side, we have organizations doing exactly what Bethany said, which is, I have a scenario I want to understand, given what's happening out there, are we protected? There's others that will ask the question of, can you give me a benchmark? I think that, from the outside in, there's been a lot of benchmarks in the industry, and we're trying also to give a benchmark from the inside out, which is, the vast majority of the security controls. But I think the third part, when thinking about resilience, is also in terms of the maturity of my program, the maturity of my controls effectiveness. And that's something that we've been trying in the past to do manually. through those assessments, manual assessments, and we're trying to move away from those assessments into something which is a bit more automated, data-driven, subjective, and risk-based.
And I think there's one more point I want to layer in here with resilience is that something that I often do is in our IT incident response tabletop exercises, CISOs kind of know where the gaps are. People share things with us. And if there's something that I think could affect our resilience, I will build that into a tabletop because it kind of exposes in that setting. One, you want to make sure everyone knows what to do, in terms of an incident, but you also want to have good after action items. So if you're aware that there may be a gap that folks aren't prioritizing as you would prioritize if you held all the purse strings and priorities for the company, you can surface those through these tabletop exercises, and then that can lead to a more resilient organization. Because from a cyber perspective, I often feel like you have to think bigger than just cyber resilience to operational resilience to business resilience, and how you are supporting all three through the program.
Very good. All right. I want to get to the point where I want to do some closing items here. By the way, let me remind everybody, click the link at the bottom of the screen, Hacking Metrics That Matter, because that's going to change in literally just a minute or two. You can register for next week. If for some reason you don't do it now, why not do it now? It'll be on the top of our page on CISOseries.com. But I just want to hit some closing items, and then I'm going to come back to both of you, and here's a question I'm going to ask. So get your answer locked and loaded. What did I not ask that we should be addressing about measuring security effectiveness? Hold tight, because that is going to be the question coming up in just a moment. Huge thanks to your company, Emmanuel Nagomi Security, for sponsoring this very episode of Super Cyber Friday. We greatly appreciate that. And starting in just, an hour and almost 40 minutes, we have our cybersecurity headlines we can review. We have Caitlin Sarian, who is the cybersecurity girl. She's like the biggest cybersecurity person on both TikTok and on Instagram. She will be our guest. And guess what? If you haven't had enough of me, you'll get to see me again hosting the show. I will be hosting. All right. Stick around for a meetup. Look at that. Look at that. It just happens like by magic. We are going to be having a meetup on Discord immediately following this very discussion. So go join our post meetup on Discord. That'll happen. It'll start in 8 minutes from now, but you can go ahead and click that link and get yourself logged in. The lower left-hand corner has all the AV stuff that you want. Do you want to sponsor a Super Cyber Friday? Just email me at info@cisoseries.com. Our first ones are opening up in April, and we would love to have you on board. All right. I will ask you, Emmanuel, first, what have we not discussed about security effectiveness that we should have addressed?
Well, I would love to hear if anyone thinks this is even a problem. Like, is security effectiveness an issue in our industry? Or perhaps it just isn't. There's different things that are the problem that we have.
You know what? By the way, I'm going to just set you up on that question. Does anyone think blank is a problem in cybersecurity? Rarely do people say, no, that's not a problem. They think everything's a problem in cybersecurity, I think, in general. But I can't imagine anyone thinks it's not a problem. But Bethany, first, do you think it's a problem? And second, what haven't we discussed that we should have discussed about security effectiveness?
Well, yes, it is a problem because I think we have such a big story to tell, and not everyone is interested in the same details. So you just always have to be strategic and thoughtful about how you have that discussion. I think something that we didn't discuss, we really focused on what might be on the higher maturity level of the discussion, when you have great tooling, when you have great data, when you can establish, comprehensive metrics program, and same thing for key risk indicators, operational metrics or key risk indicators for the board is maybe some kind of easy hacks if you lack those things. So as an example, I think a very easy way to convey effectiveness is to pick a well-regarded industry report like the IBM, the cost of a data breach report, or the BIR. And what I love about the cost of a data breach report are two things. They have the 4 essential practices this year. I guess 2024 is the closest to this year, and they also have factors that either amplify or reduce the cost of a data breach. You can just do a real quick self-assessment against those things, and that kind of gives you a sense of how are you doing against the most important elements of a cybersecurity program, and you can present that it's already the value is already there. We talk about ROI. If this will save me X amount if we have a data breach and the investment is significantly less than that cost savings, well, it kind of writes the business case writes itself.
Mm-hmm. Libby, I'm going to quote Aman Sood here, and you know what? I remember I was looking at this before our event. I was like, oh, I have to bring this up, and I completely forgot. Speaking of something hasn't been brought up, is the cyber defense matrix. Okay, for those of you who do not know what this is, I'm assuming you both know Emmanuel and Bethany. Yes. Okay, yeah. This is something. It's open source. Something Sunil Yu brought up, or something Sunil Yu created, and he actually has a book about it. What it is? It's literally a 5x5 matrix of essentially controls and the people, what you need to protect. And essentially you can fill out the grid with products, if you will, that can solve this cross connection, the type of control and the area of the business, the network, the people, whatever it is that you need to protect. It seems actually the cyber defense matrix kind of works very nicely hand in hand with your product manual, because just because you fill out the matrix, like every box, that doesn't mean you're well put on. I think that more speaks to the marketplace where you're like, okay, once they're in place, this is what you need to do. Do I have this correct?
Yes, and I'll say that I read a book, which is obviously very thorough. I think that what I especially love about the Matrix is that it simplifies. And we know that security is so complicated. We need to be able to simplify. We can't be working across whatever vendor is telling us. We basically want to know, do we have that capability? Is it covering that asset or device or whatever that is we're trying to defend? And then the third question, is it running effectively? And I think this is the way that Sunil describes it in the book is just really, really simplified and amazing for kind of as a framework.
I'm wondering if anyone's actually used that. I mean, at least like just take what tools have your environment and go, hey, where does it fill out in this grid? Have you ever done this, Bethany? Like actually seen what your tools, how they fill out in the grid?
Yeah, we didn't do the grid exercise, although I made sure everyone knew Sunil's cows and pets. I love that. I love that as well. He's so smart.
Yeah. Just briefly, that has to do with like the data you want to protect and the data that you can let die, because we don't have an attachment to the cattle, but we do have attachments to our pets.
Yeah.
His metaphors and analogies are really spot on. And by the way, I've interviewed him all these things, and he's great. In fact, like I remember one video I did actually in Tel Aviv is one of my most popular videos, which was an interview with Sunil about, I think it was the cattle and pets one. It might have been cattle and pets. I can't remember what the heck we talked about. All right, let me. We just 2 minutes left here. Let me just wrap up and thank both of you, Emmanuel and Bethany. I really, really appreciate you coming here. Again, if you have not clicked the poll, you can do that now. Even when this thing ends, you can click on it, or just let us know. We're happy to make an introduction. Are you hiring over at Nagomi Security, by the way, Emmanuel?
Sure. We're hiring across all positions: sales, pre-sales, customer success, engineering, product, basically everything.
Everything, you name it. All right. So if you're interested, please also do that. We could click on the poll as well. We'll make a connection as well for you as well. And you'll also be over on Discord as well, and you get to chat with Emmanuel and Bethany directly. All right. So do me a favor, everybody. Click the button at the bottom of the screen. We want to see you at the Discord meetup right now. Thank you very much, Bethany. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And more importantly, I want to thank my team. And that would be Aaron and Andrew and Rich for making this whole show happen. Thank you all greatly. Click the link at the bottom of the screen. Aaron, take us out.